Hey y'all, welcome to Killer Queens, a true crime podcast. I'm your host, Torella, and like most millennials, I've always had an obsession with true crime. On KQ, you'll find light true crime stories, millennial hypes and gripes, some adult language, and maybe a special guest here and there. Just like a 90s sleepover, we're just a couple BFFs hanging out, so gather round and let's launch right into it. This episode contains discussion of murder by blunt force, murder by gunshot, sexual assault, and suicide. Listener discretion is advised. On Halloween weekend in 2010, the Liske family enjoyed hunting in a neighborhood get-together before the trick-or-treat festivities were to begin. But when 16-year-old Devon realized that something was wrong after returning home from his church choir concert, he went to his parents' bedroom to see if they were there. He walked in and he thought they were pulling an elaborate Halloween prank on him when he saw them lying in bed with blood on their sheets. However, he quickly learned that it was not a prank and someone had killed his parents. Unfortunately, his parents weren't the only family members murdered in their home. His older brother, Derek, was later found dead in his bedroom as well. You guys. Okay, first of all, what are you trying to do to me? You know this is scaring me. Okay? But I do want to give a hey girl thanks to Beth for not only requesting this case, but also writing it up. So, hey girl, thanks. Okay, Beth loves spooky season, the Halloween stuff she's been thinking about for probably months. So she's put us together a really good lineup of spooky season Halloween cases that fit. Honestly, they're not way too scary. She had some scarier ones. And I was too big of a baby. So anyway, but this still does kind of scare me a little bit. Just because like Halloween and costumes, you just never know. This actually doesn't have to do with costumes. Anyway, all right, let's do it. Susan M. Liske was born on January 30th, 1964 to Benny and Edna Morse. Susan had 5 brothers, Alan, Bob, Charlie, Mike, and Gus. Wow. She graduated from Oak Harbor High School in Ohio in 1982, and then she went on to get an associate's degree from Terra Community College. Susan married Gary Griffin, and the couple had 2 sons, Derek and Devon. So Susan and Gary eventually divorced, and in 2001, Susan married William Liske Jr. Susan was an office manager for Northwest Ohio Carpenters Joint Apprenticeship and Training Committee. And prior to that, she worked for Waste Management, Bergman Paving, and Superior Pushrod. I don't know what Superior Pushrod is, but my mind a little bit went to the gutter. I'm so sorry. Susan was a member of St. John Evangelical Lutheran Church of Oak Harbor. She enjoyed hunting, camping, and gardening. She was described as having a big heart and being a loving mother, aunt, and friend. William Liske Jr., who went by Bill or Billy, was born on May 11th, 1957 in Toledo, Ohio, to William Sr. and Shirley Liske. He had 5 sisters. Isn't that funny? Susan had 5 brothers and he had 5 sisters. That's kind of funny. I didn't pick that up until I'm saying it out loud. Like I've read it, but I don't know why that's really getting me. They're like ying. They're like yin yangs. I know that's not how you say it. It's how we said it as kids, okay? Anyway, he had 5 sisters. Penny, Tammy, Lisa, Dolly, and Sue. Bill was a United States Air Force veteran, and he worked as a front loader for Waste Management. Bill enjoyed hunting, fishing, gardening, and being outdoors. Are they a perfect match or what? Like, I know obviously I'm not saying women can't like hunting and fishing and camping and outdoorsy stuff, because obviously many women do. But I feel like what I hear more often is, I don't enjoy those things, but my husband goes and does those things. And he goes for the weekend or he goes with friends or whatever, but she enjoys it just as much as he does. So, and then the 5 sisters and the 5 brothers, I mean, come on, they're perfect. Bill had a son, William J. Liske, who went by BJ from a previous marriage, and then the 2 stepsons, Derek and Devon. He had several nieces and nephews and was described as being a loving father and husband. Derek Griffin was born on July 30th, 1987 to Gary Griffin and Susan Liske. Derek attended Oak Harbor High School, where he ran track and set the school record for the 4x2 relay in 2005, the same year he graduated. Derek was a second-degree black belt in Taekwondo and fought in Italy for the U.S. team. That's pretty incredible. Derek was also a member of St. John Evangelical Lutheran Church. His favorite pastime was spending time on Lake Erie in his sailboat or on his dad's inflatable dinghy. Derek loved to sneak away in the early morning hours while the water was calm. Derek had a brother named Devon, a stepbrother BJ, and two stepsisters named Christy and Courtney. The Liskes were well known in their community, and everybody said that they were a really nice family. The family lived just outside of Oak Harbor, Ohio, in a farmhouse on 99 acres. There was a 1.5-acre pond on the property, a large pole barn, and wait, what did I say? I did not say something right. A large pole barn. I don't know what I said, and a few hunting blinds. And this was a fairly small area. I mean, certainly compared to where I live. But like the police officers knew the family. Like when they got the call to respond to the house, they got the, hey, it's the last house out on this road on the way out of the county. And they immediately knew like it was the Liske house. So I wouldn't say it's an everybody knows everybody town. It's not like it's a little bigger than your mama's Jack Russell, but it's fairly small, you know? All right, let's get to the crime and leading up to that happening. On Saturday, October 30th, 2010, Bill and his 24-year-old son BJ spent the day hunting together near the family cabin in Carroll County, which is about 2 hours away from their home. When they got back home, Bill called his neighbor, Mark Grottle, to invite him over to celebrate because he had gotten a deer that day. So Mark came over, and the three men spent the evening in the pole shed drinking beers and having a good time. They kind of packed it up around midnight, and then Mark went home. Derek was home that night, but Devon was spending the weekend with his dad. So the next day, which was Halloween, Devon left his father's house around 10 a.m. He was going to run back to his mom's house to change clothes for his choir concert at church. So he runs in, he changes, and then he goes to the concert. And then after the concert is over, he comes back home about 11:15 a.m. and he goes into his bedroom to play video games. At around 1 o'clock that afternoon, Devon's aunt Lori called him. She'd been trying to reach Derek and Susan all morning, but could not get in touch with either one of them. Derek that morning was supposed to help his uncle with some work that day, but he didn't show up. And it wasn't like Derek to just not show up. He helped his uncle with work pretty frequently, and they definitely viewed him as very reliable. So it was weird they couldn't get in touch with him. But then when she starts trying to call Susan, like, hey, I can't, like, Derek didn't show up. Do you know what's up? She can't get a hold of her either, which is strange. So once Devin talks to his aunt, he's like, okay, that is kind of weird. Actually, the house is really quiet. So he turned off his video game. He goes to find his mom and stepdad. And there is an episode of Homicide for the Holidays, which is an Oxygen series on this case. So in that two-camera interview, he said he went into their room and he found them in bed asleep, which he was like, well, that's weird. Like it's 1:30 in the afternoon and they're both early birds. Like they would not just be asleep at this time. So his brain is trying to figure out why. Why would they still be asleep? He tried to wake up his mom, but she didn't move. And he said her eyes were black and blue and she was as stiff as a board. And then he pulls the covers back and he said there was so much blood around them. And he said the thought entered his mind that this has to be like the most elaborate Halloween prank in the world because to him, that was more plausible than that his parents were dead, right? He said it was his brain's last ditch effort to convince himself that this wasn't real. It couldn't be real. This isn't happening, right? And I feel so bad for him because he's freaking 16 years old. Like, oh my gosh, that's a baby. Devin immediately called his Aunt Lori back and told her what happened. He said there's blood all over them. Lori called 911 and she drives over to their house. And the police get there and they immediately make their way into the first floor bedroom that Bill and Susan shared. They did find blood spatter covering the walls, and they could see injuries to Bill's head immediately, and they saw that he'd been shot 4 to 5 times in the head. I do have a bone to pick with Homicide for the Holidays. They showed the crime scene photo of Bill's head. They blurred it, but not much. I felt like you could still see a whole heck of a lot. And, part of my like curious brain wondering what that might be like is like, oh, huh, okay. But also the part of my brain that says his family participated in this. Was that necessary? Like, it wasn't necessary. I don't know. I'm assuming they're not gonna go back and watch it. I don't know. I don't know how that would work. I don't know if you do an interview with somebody, do you listen to it? I mean, I know that, when we covered Zale and Saxon, Susie, their mom, did an interview with Beth, who also wrote that episode up, and she did listen to it after. So, I don't know, I just kind of felt like that was a little I don't know. I didn't love that. I didn't think it was necessary, and they certainly don't do anything ahead of time like, "Hey, we're about to show you crime scene photos," which I get. If you're watching true crime, you're gonna see them sometimes, but there are some publications that will blur things really well, and there are some that don't do such a great job, and this one kind of felt that way. They found Susan face down with her legs hanging off the bed, and she had obvious gunshot wounds to her head as well. It did not look like there'd been a struggle though, so it did look like they had been asleep when they were shot. The police searched the rest of the house to ensure that there was no one else in the home, and when they went upstairs, they found a bedroom with the door locked. They forced their way in, and they found a young man in his bed with a gaping blunt force trauma wound to his head. According to the responding officers, his head and skull were cracked open, and due to the cast off, they determined that there would have been at least 2 blows. They identified this to be 23-year-old Derek Griffin. Based on the fact that he was still in the fetal position, they believe that he too was asleep when he was killed. And again, they're able to ID these victims based on that it's their house, but also that they know them. They can see their faces and they're like, yes, that's Bill. Yes, that's Derek. And Derek went to school with like the officers' kids. It's just that these officers had a really, really hard time because these were people that were known to them. Because there were 2 different methods used, police quickly came to believe that Derek would have been killed first, and they thought that he was killed by a hammer, so that Bill and Susan didn't wake up, and then that person went downstairs and then shot them both several times, because once they shoot them, it doesn't matter, there's nobody else in the house, right? So the hammer is used first so that gunshots don't wake Bill and Susan up. Absolutely chilling. The investigation began right away at the property, and police quickly determined that the house was just a normal family home and everything was in place. There were no signs of forced entry either. And not only that, there were no shell casings found at the scene, so it looked like the killer had time to clean them up. They also noted that the killer took the time to shut both bedroom doors, even locking Derek's. Investigators began searching the large property, and they found muddy footprints on the dock by the pond. They thought that maybe the killer had thrown the weapons into the pond. And again, they're thinking they're going to find a hammer and a small caliber firearm, or maybe they would find clothes or other evidence in the pond as well. The pond was drained, and investigators searched for any evidence, but they actually didn't find anything there. While this was happening, other officers were speaking with the neighbors, Mark and Michelle Grottle. What a coinky dink. We know a Mark and Michelle too. Michelle told investigators that she had heard 3 banging sounds around 6:30 that morning and that they sounded like gunshots. And some might hear that and be like, why would she not call it in? Why would she not report that? When you live out in the country like that, gunshots are just like part of the nature sounds around you. Like it's just what happens. So, like we hear gunshots all the time. I'm not going to call every time because it's contra people. The police continued to look through the house for any evidence of the killer, but they found nothing. They looked into the possibility of it being cult activity because of Halloween, but of course there was no evidence of that because that like almost never fucking happens. So that theory was quickly ruled out. So they turned to the only witness that they had at this point, and that's 16-year-old Devon Griffin. They thought it was kind of weird, a little sus, that he came home and he went straight into his room to play video games. And they thought it was weird because why didn't he wonder where his family was? It had been 2 hours since he'd been home in his room, and he didn't even pay attention that, like, hey, where's my family? I personally think that's not weird at all. My children, well, they're kind of, young children, they're a little bit more attached to you, but like if one of them is like really engrossed in a game or really engrossed in something they're watching or even really engrossed in just anything, they can go a long ass time without noticing you or not noticing you. And like I can be in the same room as them and try to get one of their attention and like say their name, say their name, say their name, touch the, like it can take several times to get them to even look up at you. So I don't know. I didn't think that was weird. He's a 16-year-old kid. He doesn't give a fuck what his parents are doing. He doesn't, he doesn't need them to fix him food. He doesn't need them to get him places. He doesn't need them to. So not that he doesn't need them. Obviously, he loves his parents, but he doesn't have to have their assistance throughout the day all the time. So I can totally see where a 16-year-old is like, I don't know, they're doing something else. I mean, they live on a huge property too. So I don't know. I didn't think it was weird. When speaking with Devon, he said that he'd spent the night at his dad's house the night before. He'd stopped home to change for that choir concert around 10. And he said there was nothing unusual at the house, so he just changed and he left for church. Detectives did speak with his dad, who confirmed that he had been at his house the night before. His dad said that Devon had stayed up until about 11 p.m. playing video games, and then he went to bed. Then he got up and left for church around 9 that morning. They did also speak with members of the church who confirmed that Devon had been there. He'd been singing, he'd been in the choir. With the confirmation from his father and the other church members, they were able to rule Devon out with the knowledge that the shots were heard at 6:30 that morning and he was still at his dad's house. Police continued talking with Devon, though, to see if there was anything else that he could tell them, and as it turned out, he could. Devon said that when he got home to change, his stepbrother BJ had been outside loading some things into Bill's white F-150 pickup and had asked him what he was doing at home and how long he was going to be there. Devon said, I'm just changing and I'm going back out to church. When he got back home after church, though, BJ and the truck were gone. Now the police had another potential witness or suspect, so they needed to find BJ. They got BJ's cell phone number, but it had been turned off, so they couldn't get in touch with him. BJ's mom and aunt lived about 15 miles away, so officers were sent over there, but he wasn't there either. Police then learned that the Liskes had a cabin in Carroll County. They contacted police there and put out a bolo, be on the lookout for BJ. Also, you guys know that I'm illiterate and I can't read, so I have an app read the scripts out to me. Like, I'm looking over them too, of course, but like, I don't know. I like to hear it. Podcasts have ruined me. Is that the same for anybody else? And also when I'm watching stuff, I have to have subtitles, which doesn't make sense with podcasts because podcasts, you're just hearing them. But since listening to podcasts, I need subtitles when I watch stuff too. It didn't start until after that. I don't know what's up with that. Anyway, my reading app lady pronounced bolo so weird. She said they contacted police there and put out a below. Like, it was kind of funny. She also couldn't get BJ down. She was like, BJ, BJ, BJ. I don't know. She put the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable a lot of the times. She had a hard time with that one. Investigators started looking into who BJ was and learned pretty quickly that there had been a lot of tension in the Liske home. So the issue started right after Bill and Susan got married in 2001 when Susan and her two sons moved in with Bill and BJ. BJ was kind of used to having the run of the house because Bill left for work early in the morning, so then BJ would be, able to do whatever he wanted. But now Susan is there, and she started enforcing rules in the home, and he did not like that. Rules like, hey, dude, you actually have to go to school. You're supposed to be in school. You got to go to school. He did not like that. There were several altercations throughout the years, and Susan was accosted by BJ on several occasions. Mark Grottle told investigators that he was often called over to the house by Bill to help diffuse the situations. It was said that Mark was somewhat of a calming presence for BJ. According to reporting by Sarah Weber for the Sandusky Register, as well as information told in the Homicide for Holidays episode, why can I not say words? Homicide for the Holidays episode. BJ had a long history with mental health issues and with law enforcement. In 2002, Bill called the authorities because BJ, who was 16 at that time, was threatening to harm himself. BJ was reportedly on house arrest at the time. And when police arrived, BJ attacked the officers and faced charges in juvenile court for assaulting a peace officer. Then in October of 2004, BJ had gotten into a fight with Susan and had hit her really hard in her chest. 2 months later, he was charged with felonious assault and kidnapping after hitting Susan with a coffee cup and stealing her car keys. However, he was found incompetent to stand trial for those charges, and then they were eventually dropped. After this, BJ moved to a group home in Sandusky, and at this group home, he had at least 3 encounters with police, one of which was a physical fight with his dad when Bill was picking him up for the weekend. While staying in the group home, BJ would live there during the week, but he was allowed to stay at the family home on the weekends. In 2007, BJ was hospitalized and diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. That's the other thing she couldn't get. She called it schizoaffective disorder. Like, get it together. I don't remember her name. Sharon. Get it together, Sharon. It's not schizo. It's not schizo. It's schizo. But he was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, bipolar type, and was put on medication. According to the Mayo Clinic's website, schizoaffective disorder is a mental health condition marked by a mix of schizophrenic symptoms like hallucinations and delusions, and mood disorder symptoms like depression and mania. Bipolar type includes bouts of hypomania or mania along with major depression. And these symptoms can vary from person to person. When BJ was 18, Bill officially kicked him out of the family home after he attempted to attack Susan while she was in the shower. So, I mean, your heart definitely breaks for this guy because he's got some mental health issues that obviously he can't control. And those are pretty significant symptoms that he's experiencing. It is really sad. And obviously, there are violent acts coming out of that. And your heart breaks for Bill and Susan, too, and all of his family who love him, but have to keep themselves safe, you know? I mean, they've got to protect themselves in some way as well. So I'm sure that making that decision to kick him out of the house completely was tough. Police also learned that Derek and BJ did not get along, and that earlier in 2010, Derek had gotten into some trouble, but Bill and Susan had not kicked him out. And this really bothered BJ because BJ had been kicked out. He felt for having trouble with law enforcement, for just getting into trouble in general. I don't think that he viewed the difference of Derek got into trouble and didn't get kicked out, but also was not violent with family members and was not putting them in danger necessarily, or that they did not feel in danger due to him. But he had routinely, at this point, assaulted Susan for sure and Bill a few times. You know, that's a major difference. But he didn't see it that way. You know, he saw it as, well, he got in trouble. It should be the same. I get in trouble, I get kicked out. You got in trouble, you should get kicked out too. You didn't get kicked out. So this is a slight against me, not that the two things are very different. And I don't know what kind of trouble Derek got into, but I have not seen anything that says that it had anything to do with being violent toward Bill or Susan or anyone else in the family. The other information that they got is that Devon and BJ pretty much avoided each other. It seemed like everybody avoided BJ kind of, except for Bill. So that morning when Devon gets home and BJ's like, "Oh, hey man, what do you got going on today? Like, how long are you going to be here? When are you coming back? What time are you leaving? Where are you going?" For him to ask him questions like that, Devon found odd because BJ didn't really talk to him. And Devon generally just tried to avoid him to not deal with it, you know? When speaking with family and neighbors about BJ, the police learned that BJ was dealing with, quote, some obvious mental illness, and he clearly had a history of violence, but they learned that if he drank alcohol, it got significantly worse. So, after learning all of this about BJ, it was imperative that the police find him. They reached out to the Carroll County Police and asked them to check the family cabin for BJ. Deputy Michael Balash was looking for the Liske cabin when he saw a white F 150 in the driveway of one of the cabins. He pulled in and confirmed that it was a match to the description that he was given, and he knew that BJ was potentially armed and dangerous, so he went ahead and called for backup. So then BJ steps out onto the front porch of the cabin and he's getting ready to smoke a cigarette. So Deputy Balash exited his vehicle, drew his weapon, and ordered BJ to the ground. He secured BJ until backup arrived and recalled that BJ was quiet during this time. They Mirandized him and then asked how long he'd been at the cabin. He said he'd been there about 3 hours, and at that point, he stopped answering any questions. Police noticed at this time that there were brown and red stains on BJ's socks and his shoes. The cabin and surrounding property was searched for the potential murder weapons, but it was the truck that had the most evidence. So they found a 22 caliber rifle that was consistent with the wounds found on Bill and Susan. There were also several blood stains in and on the F-150. While the search of the cabin was being conducted, police back at the Liske home were still searching for any evidence as well. And it was there that they found the bloody hammer that BJ used to kill Derek. It was hidden under a safe at the back of a closet. BJ was in custody and at the time charged with 1 count of murder with further charges pending. Then on the next day, November 1st, 2010, Susan Dunmeyer, which is Bill's sister, who lived about 15 minutes from the Liskes, died in a fire. The police then had to consider, is this another murder? Did BJ start the fire? Initially, the reason for the fire was unknown, but it did end up being ruled as an accidental fire. Devon said that his aunt was understandably extremely upset that day and had gone into the garage to have a cigarette, but the gas had been left on and the cigarette was not properly put out. And so there was like an explosion and a fire and she died. And he said, if it had been any other day, she probably would have been more careful with the gas and stuff like that, but obviously she was super distraught. So sad. And they knew that BJ could not have done this because he was already in jail at this point. So it was ruled an accident. On November 2nd, BJ appeared in court where he was ordered to be held on $1 million bond. DNA testing was done on BJ's clothes, and it was confirmed that he had Bill's, Susan, and Derek's DNA on his clothes, which I'm assuming they mean blood because they're just DNA. I don't think would be that surprising. He was in the house with them that day, but I mean, it's pretty, I don't think there is absolutely no question that he did this, but I would think they mean blood. Anyway, the police also matched the footprints on the dock to the shoes that BJ had been wearing. However, the actual confession to the murders came from a recorded phone call between BJ and his mom while he was in jail. She called him, or I'm sorry, he would have had to call her, right? But they were on the phone and she said, BJ, how could you? How could you do this? And he said, I wasn't in my right mind. And then he says, we can't talk about this anymore. Don't say anything else about it. But after this phone call with his mom, he did change his plea to guilty. In August of 2011, BJ pleaded guilty to 3 counts of aggravated murder. In exchange for his plea, prosecutors agreed to not seek the death penalty and would recommend life in prison without the possibility of parole. At the sentencing trial, family members of Bill, Susan, and Derek expressed that they just wanted to know why this happened. Lori Morse, Susan's sister-in-law, said, I will never get the events of that day out of my head. Our family has suffered an indescribable loss. BJ tore our hearts out and destroyed our family's happiness as we knew it. We feel such crippling grief. We will never hear Susan's laughter or see Derek smile again or feel a bear hug from Bill. Lisa, Bill's sister, said, quote, we just don't understand how something like this could happen. You see stuff like this on TV and think it will never happen to your family. You love someone so much and then they take something away from you. My only brother, my sister-in-law, Derek. She then turned to BJ and said, quote, I just don't know how you could do it when he loved you so much. The judge then did have to stop her and advise her to address the court, not the defendant. BJ made a statement as well. He said, quote, I love my dad very much, and it makes me feel sick every time I think about what I did. I can't really explain why this all had to happen, but I think most of all, it had to do with my mental illness. He also stated that it was all his fault. He doesn't blame anyone but himself. Before handing down the sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole, Judge Bruce Winters said, quote, "The court is not in a position to make this whole. It is not in a position to bring back loved ones. The court can only hope to do justice." Prosecutors believe that BJ bludgeoned Derek to death with the claw hammer before going downstairs to shoot his father Bill 5 times in the head. He then shot Susan 3 times. There was also physical evidence that indicated that Susan was sexually assaulted, either right before or right after her death. BJ's defense attorney, Adrian Zimmerman, said that BJ was decided legally sane, but was clearly mentally ill. He stated that it was unknown whether or not BJ had taken his prescribed medication for his schizoaffective disorder on the night or morning of the murders, but it is known that he had been drinking alcohol, and we know that alcohol can affect those medications and or, he may not have even been taking them. And he did have a history of, and many people with these kind of mental disorders do, where you'll think you're better. You'll feel good for a while, right? And then they're like, okay, I don't need that medication anymore. And it's kind of a cycle, which is really unfortunate too. And he did have a cycle of that. So it's possible that he wasn't even taking it, but alcohol can absolutely affect the results of that medication as well. On March 15th, 2015, 5 years after the murders, BJ Liske was found dead in his cell at Ross Correctional Institution. He died of self-inflicted wounds, and he was 29 years old at the time. One of BJ's defense attorneys, John Thebes, stated after his death that he wasn't surprised that BJ had died by suicide. He said, quote, "He was obviously a disturbed human being, and facing the prospect of life without parole, it doesn't surprise me." Thebes also stated that psychologist evaluations that were done for the court made BJ's mental health problems clear and that he may have been better suited in a mental health facility rather than prison. I totally agree. I really don't understand why he was not housed in a mental health facility. He absolutely needed treatment. And I'll just let Devon say it. So at the end of Homicide for the Holidays, Devon said, quote, "BJ wasn't a monster. We were trying our hardest to kind of help him, but we may not have had the necessary understanding to help him the way he needed to be helped." Which is like so sweet and so mature. I mean, this person murdered your mom, your stepdad, and your brother. And he says, look, we're not talking about a monster here. We're talking about somebody who needed help, and we didn't realize to the degree that he needed help, And we weren't equipped to give him all the help that he needed. And I do wish that he had gotten that help after his conviction, because I do think that he would have benefited more from being in a mental health facility. Devon did end up getting married on the property that he grew up on. And he said he can't have a sad memory of a place where he lived and he loved him. And he grew up there because Bill and Susan had been together for over 10 years at that point. They moved in 2001, right? This is 2010. So he would have been 6 or 7 when they moved in there. I mean, all of his memories are there. Devon and his wife, Alyssa, have a son who they did name Derek after his brother. Beth did check out Devon's Facebook page. He participates in BMX competitions and has had some podiums. Derek also competes in the children's division as well and also made the podium. And apparently podium is like a tournament or something, I think, or like a competition. I had to Google that because I didn't know. But that's awesome. What a sweet way to commemorate his brother's memory. And, they still, I guess Devon owns the property. I'm not totally sure, but he definitely did get married there. And like you said, it's where he grew up. Like he has all of his best memories there, except for that day. And he didn't want to let that kind of taint his whole, memory of his whole life growing up. So I completely understand that. And that's it, you guys. So another Halloween case in the books, but let me know what you think, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Love you. Bye. If you liked this episode, be sure to like this episode and follow the show so that you never miss out on new episodes. Get in on the conversation on Facebook and Instagram. You can find us at Killer Queens Pod, or you can join our Facebook discussion group at Killer Queens Podcast, where we discuss cases covered on the show and all things 90s. If you want to submit a case to be covered on the show, visit killerqueenspodcast.com/case submission and just complete the form. And if we cover the case, we'll give you a shout out on the show. Lilas.